Did you know you could shop around for prescription prices? With GoodRx, you can find free coupons at over 70,000 pharmacies and save up to 80%. It's that easy. But don't just take my word for it. Dr. Adam says, I've been telling all my patients about GoodRx. Jacqueline says, my medication was $65 without insurance, but I paid $25. Aubriana says, you don't have to pay full price to live your best life. Couldn't have said it better myself. GoodRx is 100% free. Download the GoodRx app today and start saving. GoodRx is not insurance.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick. Here tonight to talk about the Ravens offense in the game against the Jaguars. Plenty of it in a 40-14 win. Joined today by Gordon McGuiness of PFF. Gordon, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks.
Great to have you on again, my friend, and always refer to PFF in positive terms in terms of people getting a subscription to that. Want to make sure that people know it's still out there. I know they've had some specials recently. Can you tell me about what pricing is like at PFF for various packages?
Yeah, we've just had the most recent special offer end, so it's back to what it was previously, which I think is $200 for the year subscription to PFF Elite, which is like our most premium package, which gets access to grades on a game-by-game, season-by-season, etc. level that goes all the way back to 2006. We do quite often, I don't know when the next planned offer is that's coming up, but quite often we have like 30% off and things like that. So it's always good to keep an eye on our social media channels because it's always well publicized when we do.
Okay, and the Elite system is excellent. Is one level higher is the team system where they get the play-by-play grading, but it's just the game-by-game grading that you give out with the Elite system.
Yes, exactly. That's correct.
All right, and does the team grading have more information about? The individuals cannot buy the team grading, I assume, right? Even if they want to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to have it done, probably. But the team grading includes a lot more detail at the play level.
Yeah, there's so you'll hear people on social media quite often refer to PFF Ultimate, and that has part of the kind of team-based stuff in, and there's a lot more kind of filtering that you can do. You know, you can look at grades based on formation. You can look at grades based on alignment and certain things, little things like that. And also you can filter stats and things by that as well.
Okay. So I was always wondering, some of the times we hear about a player getting fairly deep into the hole, like Bradley Bozeman was at the beginning of last year, let's say, and I would want to see, well, how did he do from week 7 on an aggregate basis? Because he really had his last bad game in week 6. And you could presumably get that at the team level. Is there a way to get that at the elite level? Yeah.
So within PFF Elite, if you're in the position grades, you can't go across seasons, but you can filter by specific weeks. So on the defensive side, for example, I was looking at Patrick Queen the other day, and I took out like his 4 really bad games of the year. And if you take out those, he's actually having a fairly solid, pretty, average linebacker, top 30 linebacker in the NFL season, but those 4 games. So to do that, once you're in the by position grades, you go to the season and you can then just click on the ones that you want. So
okay, you use control like you would in Excel or something?
I think you actually just click. So if you just click with the mouse, it should allow you to.
It's not. I don't know where I would have to do it. So I'm inside his week. I have his weekly grades up.
Oh, so what to do? You can only do it by position, but you'll be able to find him within that. So if you go to
by position,
and then
okay,
let's pick.
And then we'll go to defensive reports for linebackers.
Yep.
All right, and then let's see, what else do I get here? So I've got Queen in here, but it doesn't. I have minimum snaps draft year, 32 teams.
So up on the
weeks, there you
top
go.
left, yeah. If you click on that, you can then filter out some things. So
okay.
I think with Queen it was quite interesting. I looked at the last 3 as well, and the last 3 again, much more stable. You take out those really bad games he had at the start of the year, kind of throughout the year so far, and he comes in a lot more favourable than he previously did. I think he's not quite on the first page, but snap counts also filter into that. So
sure,
filter the snap counts a little bit, it gets that. So I thought that was quite interesting about Patrick Queen.
Okay, well, you taught me something new there. That's terrific. Okay, that's fun to see. Well, I want to get back to the Jags game here since we're there, and wonderful lopsided win, very much the 2019 formula. Got up big. They played good defense, I thought, with the lead, and got some things done on the pass rush in the second half, even when they were not scheming up as much rush. We're here to talk about the offense, but I thought, formula-wise, that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, it was really nice to see, for a team that it's kind of felt a lot of the year like they've struggled to get into like a good offensive flow in most of the games. They've had a couple of games where it's been a lot easier that way, but it's felt like the success in offense has been a lot more of a struggle this year, and this was getting back to, as you said, that 2019 formula that almost like everything just seemed to work on a pretty decent level, and. I think I know not everyone will agree with this because people love seeing, huge downfield passes every single play and every opportunity. But when the Ravens offense gets into a full flow like this, so much fun to watch because there's so much movement, be it with the offensive linemen moving and pulling, when Lamar can get out onto the edge, the running backs, and even in the passing game, you get to see receivers crossing the field a little bit more. So, I think it's a really fun offense to watch when they get into full flow like that. When it's a bit more of a struggle, it can be a bit of a grind at times. But in these sorts of games, I think it's great fun.
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, I like to watch teams run the football effectively, and there's a tremendous amount of scheme that goes with that. I really love the team blocking that the Ravens do. They get much more blocking from their wide receivers than most teams get. Miles Boykin is a guy who gets beat on pretty badly, but he's been a terrific blocker through all of the receiving difficulties.
Yeah, and I I don't know who it was, so I can't give them credit, but I saw someone tweet a couple of weeks ago, and they've kind of repushed the sentiment a couple of times. Show me a good run and I'll show you wide receivers blocking downfield. And I think that's a really good general comment to make on these things, which is, everyone focuses on the running back and the offensive line, but what takes those runs from 6 yards to 16 to 26 and beyond is when you get those guys doing that little bit of extra work downfield.
Yeah, very much that level 2, level 3 block. I want to talk a little bit about more about scheme later, but let's get through some of the more normal stuff. And the first thing I want to ask you about, because it's all we Ravens fans care about, is what's the Ravens' most reasonable path to the playoffs? It seems like there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of things that can slip right through their fingers in terms of other teams giving them help. Yeah,
the best one and the most reasonable one makes it as nice and simple as possible is Miami lose this week to Las Vegas. I almost called them Oakland. I think from what I looked at on 538, I think even if the Ravens lose this week, if the Dolphins also lose this week, the Ravens will win then because they can afford to lose the non-conference game. But yeah, it's Miami looked pretty solid last week against a New England team that the Ravens probably should have beaten. The worrying thing for me is that there is reliance on either the Steelers picking up, where they've really struggled recently, or you're going to have to hope that Buffalo have something to play for in Week 17,
which they won't.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance they're going to have number 2 sewn up by the end of this week. So it's a scary prospect that we could be looking at an 11-5 Ravens team who, could be as good as the second best team in the conference, and they might not make the playoffs. Yeah,
I think that's a very fair assessment. Is they might be the second best team in the conference. Cleveland is a little bit of a funny situation. They're just into positive points now, or are they still negative? I think they're +6 or something now for the year.
I think that's right.
And the Ravens are plus 116. Which is better than the Steelers. It's better, in fact, than anyone in the entire NFL, with the exception of the Chiefs. But we don't play for a point differential. We play for wins. and sadly, the Ravens, within a 7-team year, could be an 11-5 team out of the playoffs. And it has happened once in a 6-team year with the 2008 Patriots. But I don't believe it's otherwise happened.
No, and it's not even, you miss out at 9-7, there's years you can get
blame yourself.
You miss out at 10-6, you're feeling a little bit sorry for yourself. 11-5 in a 7-team year is just really bad luck. You know, the Ravens and the Chiefs both had the highest win total coming into the season at 11. So 11 is like where you put elite teams at coming into the season. And for that to miss out in the playoffs is just incredible.
Yeah, enormously unbalanced conference results with, in large part with the NFC East playing so poorly. But maybe that's where the Ravens need to kick themselves a little bit, because they certainly did beat the entire NFC East, so far, unless they lose to the Giants. But that was an advantage that was built in for them. And so the 11-5 record is really like a 7-5 record against non-NFC East teams, if you want to think of it that way.
Yeah, and you know, I think the Ravens are going to look back if they do miss the playoffs, or even if they make the playoffs, and they're going to have to go on the road if they do. They're going to look back on games like the New England game. They're going to look back on the Tennessee game, where they had very strong opportunities to win those games. Even even the first Pittsburgh game.
Absolutely.
The difference in that game was just it's a very poor decision-making game from Lamar Jackson. You know, it's very rare in his career that you can say his decisions probably were the reason why the Ravens lost. And he had a couple of really poor interceptions in that game that, you know, otherwise I think they win quite easily. Even with those, you know, his throw into the end zone with the big hit at the end was a really good throw. You know, that was worthy of a game-winning touchdown. So you look at those, you know, 3 games that could and possibly should have gone the other way, and you know we're then talking about a team that is once again competing for the 1 or the 2 seed.
Hey guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got to tell you about MyBookie, because this countdown to Christmas this week, they are giving away free stuff every single day. Today when I hopped on, it was a free $10 bet on anything I wanted to bet on. So hop on. Whenever you're listening to this, head on over to MyBookie, sign up, deposit. Remember, if you use the code RAVENS, they will match you halfway. So if you put in $200, they're going to give you an extra $100 to play with, and that's on top of this daily countdown to Christmas that they're doing. So treat yourself to some extra cash in your pocket this holiday season by investing in your intuition. Hop on board with the Ravens this week if you want to take a favorite. There's also some great close games going on, like the Colts and Steelers game this weekend. So make sure whatever you're doing over on MyBookie, you use the code RAVENS when you deposit.
Total Wine has thousands of wines to savor and pairings for every flavor. Spirits line the shelves. Gifts are easy with helpful elves. A wonderland to explore. Total Wine and more. Drink responsibly. B21.
Who are you texting?
My therapist.
You text with your therapist?
Text, video chat, call. Yep.
That sounds too easy. How did you find her?
I just went to betterhelp.com/save. She's a licensed therapist and it's all online. I connect when it's convenient for me and don't waste time driving anywhere. Plus, it's affordable.
I wonder if I should try it.
It's great to talk to someone in confidence. She's helped me sort out quite a few things. And right now you save 10% off the first month when you go through betterhelp.com/save.
BetterHelp.com/save. Got it.
All right, thanks, Josh, for that. Offensive line scoring. Let's get to that. I know that's always an interesting topic. I would talk a little bit about the aggregate results, because obviously it was an effective day for the offensive line in a lot of ways. 62 scored snaps. That doesn't include the 2 kneels at the end. There were no sacks charged to the offensive line. That single sack, to me, was a Jackson holding the ball too long in the pocket. That's what you guys had it scored to?
Yep. Yeah, that was exactly how we had it. In fact, I think we had some hurries to the offensive line, but no hits, and the sack was the one that was to Lamar, and it's exactly what it was. It's you know, it's not something I think he's guilty of too often. Just not only holding on to the ball a little too long, just has to anticipate that, you know, you haven't moved much in the pocket at that point. Pressure's probably coming, and you're at risk of not only being sacked but losing the football.
Yeah, the more common Jackson sack that I look at it is he turns a pass play into a run play himself, and then takes a 1 or 2 yard loss, or even a 0, and that ends up being a sack. And you know, you don't charge it to an offensive lineman at that point. You might have charged a pressure for the pocket getting flushed, but you don't end up charging the hit or the sack for that. Exactly. And so that's the way I've got it too, with five pressures as well in this game on 27 dropbacks. That's okay. It's maybe a little bit high. Ample time and space, the 3-second pocket, was outrageously good in this game. At 56% of the dropbacks, I know you guys use a 2.5-second standard. We don't want to talk methodology too much on this, but that's a tremendous number of 3-second pockets for one game.
Yeah, exactly. And I always find it interesting with Lamar because, the time he has the ball in the pocket, I think it's good when you can look at the number of times because the fact that he can extend the play can drive up his average time in the pocket.
Yes.
You can look at just those individual plays and you can then see that over the course, and that's a combination of the offensive line giving him time and also, just the defenses being, I think, still terrified of what he can do if you're undisciplined. So, that was interesting.
By the way, the time to throw stat, there's probably an easy way to fix it, is just to throw out the two outliers on either end when calculating that average.
Yeah, probably.
And then you get rid of the one time he held the ball for 9 seconds, that increases his average time by 0.14 seconds for the whole game, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, no runs for loss were charged the offensive line as I had it. I think they might have had a run for loss on a stretch. No, one illegal blindside block was the only penalty. That was a horrendous play for Patrick McCary that we'll get to in a minute when we talk about him. Orlando Brown, I thought he had an okay game against K'Lavon Chaisson, who's really been struggling.
Yeah, Orlando Brown's an interesting one because he's just been voted to the Pro Bowl, and I think he's a perfectly good offensive lineman, a perfectly good offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I do think at times people overvalue him a little bit in terms of thinking he is as good or better than Ronnie Stanley, and I don't think he's quite at that level. The thing that worries me a little bit looking ahead is that 2 Pro Bowls suggest that you're probably going to have to give him top offensive line money, and I don't think that's something the Ravens will do. So I worry a little bit that as a good solid offensive lineman, he's possibly pricing himself out of Baltimore in the future.
Pretty good chance of that, I'd say. And we really always knew that would happen, that you can't afford to pay both offensive tackles typically on most teams. You're going to be paying your quarterback, you can't. So it doesn't really come as a surprise. Some of the strategy around what they do this offseason in terms of do they trade him or do they try and make an effort maybe to sign him early and maybe with a COVID year try and work out a deal that is attractive to both sides and gives him financial security. I don't know what his personal financial situation is like, but he comes from a football family and a father who made some money, so that may not really be the kind of concern for him that it is for another player.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that.
You and I talked last year a little bit about him playing on the right side with the read option pistol being such the bread and butter for the Ravens, and Lamar usually, facing the handoff to the right side allowed Stanley to make a lot of very easy down blocks and not have to block a guy in more space on that right side. Did I say I meant Orlando to make a lot of easy down blocks if I didn't say that correctly? But anyway, and then he would move to level 2. And it didn't even really have to be that much for him because he really only had to move up kind of half a level to hit that scraping linebacker, as opposed to really find somebody in space in level 2, which a guard often has to do. So there was definitely a whole different degree of difficulty last year. What's been really impressive this year is his ability to deal with his own limitations in terms of doing some pass blocking on the left side and kind of prove a little bit of that versatility. I'm with you. I think he's a 65th, 70th percentile offensive lineman who is good, but not the best in the league. And I think in a lot of ways the Ravens need to be very careful about how they deal with him contractually.
The thing I think that's so interesting about that as well is I think people quite often get offended or upset at the notion that a player is good, not great. And especially with the offensive line, it's very much like a weak link unit. If you can have, Ronnie Stanley being great is fantastic. If you can have another good player there and then some solid players, it's something that you have enough, as long as you don't have bad players and players who are making a lot of mistakes along the offensive line, generally in the NFL, you're probably going to have a decent amount of success. And I think that's something, he doesn't make too many mistakes that hurt the Ravens. And that's why I think the situation will be interesting. If he has, in fact, priced himself out by being at a level that's going to make him a lot of money elsewhere, it is going to be a loss for the Ravens offensive line. It's one of those things, like you said, it's very difficult to pay both offensive tackles like top offensive tackles in the NFL. Yeah,
the Ravens have proven themselves to be excellent at finding mid-round talent for the right tackle position, and specifically, I'm going back to Ryan Wagner. You know, they had other people like Yanda is frankly a mid-round talent. Brown himself was a third-round pick that dropped due to combine limitations. So, you know, lot to hope for still. And you know, he's a Baltimorean, so maybe he hangs on here. And I would certainly love to see him play his career here, but I have a feeling with other players like Mark Andrews and others who really are so central to the offensive success, I really question whether they can get it done. I want to talk a little bit about Brown in this game. 1.5 pressures, 1 quarterback hit as I scored. He was the only one to get a quarterback hit in this game. He flushed the pocket forward. It was a tough charge. He could have gotten just a pressure on that. He did have 3 missed blocks and made 6 of 8 pulls. Now, I don't know how you guys score this, and I don't want to get, again, too much into methodology, but when they're running this counter, he has a difficult pull job because Bozeman, the puller ahead of him, has the easy block to make. He just has to find the first man, and he's proven to be very good at that. Brown has to find a second guy. That often means going into level 2 to find that man, and it can be very challenging for him to do so, particularly when the run is going the other way.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, so generally, if it is a block that is incredibly difficult or it's a tricky block for someone to make, we're not going to be as harsh if it's missed as it is for, you know, if you have a nice simple block to make and it's something like that. So on those pulls, you know, if he loses to the linebacker or someone at the second level, he's probably going to pick up some kind of downgrade, but it's not going to be the same as if he flat misses, you know, someone that he has a very clear read on.
Right. The more common thing I'm seeing from Brown is running into open space in level 2 because there just isn't anyone to block at that point. The flow of the play has gone the other way. All right, going on, Bozeman. He certainly finished up last year very strong. He's had a little bit of an up and down year this year, but I actually think he's been pretty good. 1.5 pressures in this game, 6 missed blocks. He made 12 of 13 on pulls. He really drives the power run game. He's connecting on a very high percentage of these pulls, and that's something I really love about his game. The other thing we don't really give him enough credit for is he's had some difficult 3-tech matchups. Cam Hayward is a good one recently, but then also when he goes to the other side and pulling, he often has to block T.J. Watt. So you gets a mixed bag of difficulty there that he often has to pick up a very good wily rush end on some of his pulling opportunities.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you in the sense that if you were to kind of look at his year overall, you're probably going to say it was kind of solid, but it's been more of like up and down rather than being at a kind of solid baseline the entire year. But as you rightly said, some of the matchups he has within the division are as difficult as you'll get for a guy at that position in an offense that asks, you know, a fair amount athletically of their interior offensive linemen. Mm-hmm.
He's one of several short arm players on the Ravens interior line, and I've heard it said by people inside the Ravens organization that he was on the ground too much. People accuse me of being too enamored with long-armed linemen, but that's one of the things you really notice is the shed action verb shows up in all the time in my notes for the guys with 31 and 31.5-inch arms, but you move out to the guys who are longer, and they get beat in other ways, don't get me wrong, but it's much rarer that they truly get shed because you get shed generally by longer-armed players getting you off balance and taking you to the ground quickly.
Yeah, and so there's always these things, you know, be it offensive linemen with arm length and quarterbacks with hand size and these things. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be players who have those. I don't
beat the system, beat the trade.
Yeah. They're always going to be, you know, and they can get by beyond that. Like Joe Thomas, I don't think had particularly long arms. I think they were actually a little longer. Yeah, Marshall Yanda, and Yanda was fantastic even at tackle. So, but there's generally a reason why scouts have these things that make those players outliers, and you know it gives you pause when you're looking at scouting them. You're going to be a bit more diligent in certain things, and it's because of things like that you said, that over years of watching these players play, you know that generally speaking, if someone has shorter arms, they're going to have to make up for it in other ways.
All right, Patrick McCary, another short arm guy at center, was having a really good game, I thought, until the play that kind of made it not so. Bad snap, recovered by Huntley, and then Huntley made a nice run on the play for positive yardage, and I forget if it was 5-6 yards because, hey, it didn't hold up. But then he made an illegal blindside block that was not only unhelpful to the play, it's a situation where he just has to know the rules better and understand that he can't make a block in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's always a little tough for players when things go like very much off script. But especially in an offense like the Ravens, you should probably be expecting things to go off script. Maybe not to the point that someone's recovering a fumble and sprinting off, but Lamar Jackson's capable of scrambling around back there. I think McCarry's a really interesting player as well, because I don't, watching him play, I don't ever think he's going to be an elite center. But I also don't think he has too many games in his career where he's a problem. And kind of what I talked about earlier, I think that's a really valuable characteristic for an offensive lineman, especially a guy like him who I think came into the league undrafted. Just being able to man that, and maybe he's not the Ravens' long-term center, but he also doesn't give them too many problems at that position.
Yeah, I'm with you. And he played certainly 2 good games in a row after some significantly mediocrity leading up to those games, honestly. The where I draw the line in terms of overrating McCarry is to say, based on a half a play against New England, that he could be the right tackle whenever the Ravens need him to be.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is just it's a way overstatement of his powers. And going on to powers with that segue, no penalties again, which has been the big bugaboo for Powers this year. It's pretty much the way he's been downgraded as I've scored him. He did have a half a pressure in this game, 2 missed blocks. We talk about the short arm thing versus the long arm thing. Powers is in the middle. He's one of the only linemen who's in the middle for the Ravens. And he has a much better time keeping his feet than the other linemen. Just if you watch them play after play, you notice McCarry and Bozeman are on the ground a lot more than Powers is. But very happy with his play the last few games.
Yeah, and he's someone I think we spoke about last year. I think one of the things we talked about was a little bit of frustration that they didn't use the time later in games when they had big leads to get him more playing time. And, it's changed a little bit now. He's had a couple of rough games this season, but he's a guy who I think, again, similar to a lot of the offensive linemen that the Ravens have, you've generally got a pretty solid baseline from him. And I wanted him to be the right guard from day one at the start of this season. And generally his play this season, I think this was just another really solid game where, again, if you're a right guard and you're not going to be Marshall Yanda, and you're not going to be a Hall of Famer, as long as you're going to be solid and do your job there, I think that's a really good position to be in for the offense.
Yeah, and the Ravens in the last few weeks, one of the things that's turned the offense around is they've found their starting 5 now. It's no longer an issue. So I know we agree on this. I see you nodding your head, but there's no doubt about Brown is probably would be one of the worst losses if they lost him, because they just have nobody to replace him at this point.
Yep.
There's certainly Bozeman is driving the run game. McCarry is the guy at center, and there's really nobody who's competing with him directly. Could Ben Bredesen be a guy next year? Maybe. Who knows? Could Skura come back and do as good a job? Maybe. Who knows? At right guard, I think Powers is clearly the guy. I don't think he's at all threatened right now. And Harbaugh's made some statements that would make it difficult for him to back off Powers at right guard now, saying he's playing the best football of his life. And then at right tackle, they kind of had a process of elimination game going on where they continue to rotate play with Phillips and Fluker, and Phillips is kind of limboed under Fluker's level of play, and probably needs to be reconsidered for an interior line position next year.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Fluker as well, I thought this was one of his better games of the year. And I think that style of game really suits him well. With the best will in the world, I don't think he's going to be a guy who, if you're losing and you're having to pass the ball more, it's a little bit more of a concern athletically. He's going to get beat fairly easily by good edge defenders. But in this game, when the Ravens are playing with a lead, and he can kind of enforce his will on players a little bit with his strength and things like that, I think that's a game that really suits his playing style. So if they can get into those kind of positive score differentials, I think it's the one position on the offensive line that probably worries me a little bit. But if they can stay in good down and distance and good score differentials, then I think they can probably survive it.
Right. I agree completely, and it's very much goes back to the Orlando Brown comments about last year, is that the position is easier to play with Lamar if they're playing a lot of their offensive stylistic components, a lot of their scheme that they do now, and it's a fairly easy down block for Fluker. He's a very strong player. He can really help Powers with that down block in terms of making his block an easy get off his pins after that. And it does not require tremendous mobility that Fluker really would be challenged by to get into level 2. Now, that said, Fluker's made a lot of level 2 blocks these last few weeks. I've been really impressed with an increased level of mobility. I've also would say that his 12-6 blocking, meaning his ability to take the edge defender around the edge of the pocket like as a clock and take him to 6 p.m., 6 a.m., either 6 o'clock, has really been enough to get by. And it hasn't been against zeros in terms of pass rushers. I thought it's actually been, pretty good. He's played a game and a half of absolutely horrific football this year. And then the rest of his play, right tackle, actually, I think has been pretty good.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
All righty. Phillips, 8 scored snaps, and yet he somehow has the play that I can't help but watch 10 straight times whenever it comes up. How about you? How many times do you estimate you've watched that play?
Just at least 10. It's just I've seen I'm not even sure there's that many running backs that have like the level of acceleration he had the moment, and maybe it was fear more than anything else when he picked up the ball because it was a very uncomfortable situation for him. But he just like flew like he was shot out of a cannon. It was, and I think I saw someone tweet that on Good Morning Football on the NFL Network, it was the angry run of the week this week.
The angry run of the run. So they had the next gen stats, and we were always seeing these top speed things, which I don't really put a lot of stock in, but they got him at 13 miles an hour top speed on that run. But then when you figure that out on a momentum basis, it's more scary, and you understand what happened to Miles Jack on the play.
Yeah,
and he really got bombed. So anyway, it was fun to watch. Matt Skura, taking a supporting role at this point. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens to him in his career. 7 of 8, 8 of 9. I had him scored for, and I've missed a play from Skura last week. So I need to go back to the all 22 and still do my follow-up offensive line work. But that's I'm not sure if he played 8 or 9 snaps. It's good that he's there. The Ravens have very real depth on the offensive line at this point. I think either Phillips or Skura or both could take over an interior position. They just have no depth at tackle.
Yeah, and it kind of felt like that coming into the year. The really frustrating thing was that Will Holden looked like the depth at tackle, and then he got sniped by the Colts that sniped him.
Yes, the Colts. Yeah, and it was so predictable.
Yeah, he played okay in the game. He came in and played. So. Yeah, that was frustrating just because, as you said, they have very little depth, especially since Stanley's gone down. There's really not. I'm assuming it would be Phillips that would probably take over at right tackle if they didn't shuffle things around entirely and put McCarry out there and Skura at center or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will tell you probably have evidence this from your own work, but you definitely get evidence that the players are watching what you're writing about them. And I got tweets from Casey Holden talking about thanks for the grade, like this is the Patrick Mahomes rate or something. Like it's thanks for the grade against the Patriots, I think it was, where he played a half. Maybe it was Tennessee, whichever game it was. He played a half. He played pretty well. He had one penalty that was really bad. He had another penalty that maybe you could call it on him, but it was really on Andrews on the other side. But I graded him an A on the game. And it was, you hear from his wife about this. And then the nice thing about it is she also told me that he'd been picked up by the Colts. So I heard first on that one. And it was kind of cool. Apparently they did try and work something out, and they just were not able to come up with a deal. I think they would have probably had to sign him for next year as well if they were going to do it. So, I don't know if that would have made sense or not. But it seems like, NFL tackle depth is so difficult. Why not? I mean, you do all kinds of futures contracts with players. Why not? I mean, it would involve some guaranteed money for 2021, but...
Yeah, it would have made a lot of sense, especially because, one injury at the tackle spot, and the Ravens are in a pretty rough spot.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. If they lost Brown at this point, how do you think they'd align?
I actually... Fluker, I'm guessing they'd probably put at left. Did they play Fluker at left early in the year?
Terribly.
Yeah, yeah. You're then not going to move Bozeman, McCarry. I reckon they'd probably go Skura at centre and put McCarry out to right. Maybe they're
Okay,
not.
and not use Phillips there.
Yeah. It might be Phillips. That's probably the part of it that I'm less sure of.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Well, let's move on. Talk a little bit about Lamar, because it's certainly exciting what's been happening the last 3 games. After that early interception, I looked on his passer rating. I saw 133, and I'm going, how did that happen? I didn't even think you could do that with an interception, but it turns out, and this is really an interesting thing about the passer rating formula, when you dissect it a little bit, he still got half the points from the passer rating there for component for interceptions, which means almost interception rate of almost 5% can still get you half of the passer rating points for interception. It's just an interesting subplot of the formula. Obviously, it's not graded well for current interceptions level. It's not separating men from boys in the way it should.
Yeah, I've always found the passer rating thing, even more than that, the thing that's always struck me as really bizarre is that if you have an incompletion on every single play, it's like 39. 39.6. It's like a really weird arbitrary number for just spiking the ball in the ground for every single play. But yeah, I thought it's been nice to see Lamar getting back into a lot more flow in the offense. It's definitely been a disappointing year compared with last year. I think that was always going to be likely, though. Last year, I don't think last year is the only season that Lamar will have in his career that is incredible and special. But I think he's probably, with the way he is as a passer, where I think he can be a bit streaky. I don't think he's someone who is careless with the ball as a passer. He doesn't make a lot of throws that are likely to be picked off, which is why the Steelers game was such a big surprise. But yeah, it's a little bit frustrating in the passing game when he misses high a little bit, but I think he's capable of having that season he had last year again. And if not that, he's certainly capable of going on some pretty special runs, I think, even if it's a 4 or 5 game stretch. And I just, as an athlete, he's one of the most, if not the most incredible player in the NFL. And you see it every single game, even the games where he's had struggles. There's 2 or 3 plays that are just a reminder that the bind he puts in defenses is incredible. And I think people talk a lot about how good a season Kyler Murray's had running the football. People have been enamored with Jalen Hurts the last couple of weeks. And as good as both of those guys are, I think Lamar as an athlete is just a different level. And I think you see that when you see opposing defenses play him, that it terrifies them.
Two things I kind of want to unpack in that. The first is that Lamar has clearly been playing with some sort of an injury. It may be lingering groin, whatever. But I had this discussion with other people on the show, and lateral movement is impacted. There's no doubt about it. And that's part of the reason why they're not running as much from the pistol. They're running a lot of sidecar and letting the back be the edge threat and Lamar being an up-the-middle threat, which normally I would be very opposed to because of the additional risk I think that entails, to not have the sideline as your friend. But it's something where I think they've made an accommodation for what's going on with Lamar's groin, and it's just it is what it is. And right now the Ravens, they cannot afford to coddle Lamar Jackson these last 2-6 football games in whatever level. They need him to perform every week.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting with Lamar because so many people often talk about you don't want to run him too much. And I understand that because there's really not a way of getting around it. I think he's good at avoiding contact as best as he can. But as a quarterback, if you're taking additional hits that other quarterbacks aren't taking, it's probably going to have a negative impact on the longevity of your career. But at the same time, he is so good and so devastating at doing those things that you're kind of trying to weigh up the balance of, would you rather get 10 years of Lamar Jackson being this incredible threat, or would you rather have 14 years of him, where he passes the ball a little bit more but doesn't quite give you the same excitement? And maybe it's not 10 and 14, things
might be 6 and 12.
Yeah. But it's always something I really struggle with because I want to see him in the NFL for as long as possible, but he's just so much fun when he is just full Lamar Jackson, willing to take a hit, going up the middle, all those things. And like I said, I think he's actually a lot better than people give him credit for at not just avoiding hits. I think when people talk about avoiding hits, they often talk about going out of bounds. But there's also, getting yourself into a position whereby the hit's coming, you're able to absorb it without it being impactful. So I think he's pretty good at that as well.
Yeah, he's done a good job of not taking hits on the legs, and I looked at all the hits from last year that he took, both quarterback hits and runs, and a high percentage of them, like 47%, were with just minimal contact, and those included out-of-bounds plays and other plays where he slid down, only a couple of those. But the big hits he took were on quarterback hits, and that's very hard to avoid for any quarterback. So it's the one time when you're in a very compromised position and the quarterback hit, the direction of the quarterback hit can be at a significant angle in the opposite direction, where most of the time, as you stated, when he's running the football, he knows exactly what he's doing about getting hit, usually by one guy, usually on the torso. You don't want to be hit legs, you don't want to be hit head. Usually on the torso, and taken to the ground in a convenient manner for him. Yeah,
and I think as well that you're absolutely right that the most dangerous time for a quarterback in terms of hits that are going to have, kind of season-lasting damage is when you're back there to pass. You see quarterbacks, and I think as well part of it is that if it comes as you're throwing, your legs are very much set to be throwing the ball. You've potentially got a leg planting in the ground. We've seen Joe Burrow get hit this year for, he was in the pocket, got turned around and twisted like that. So it's a dangerous place to be because when you're throwing the ball, you're, doing so in a way that leaves you pretty unprotected.
Well, the other thing was that the sacks is that a lot of those he's already turned it into a run play. And even when he hasn't, even when he's in the pocket and he has to go down, he still is making some choices about how to accept that contact. It's really the quarterback hits that are the scary ones, that are the ones that usually can entail some really difficult contact. I want to also go back to the other thing, which is Lamar's ability to run around, how that'll affect his game. We have a Coach Evans on the show from time to time. You may know him, and he has some great words of wisdom for us all the time. But the thing I really loved about him was when Lamar loses his speed, he's going to become Russell Wilson, is what he said, is that he's still going to be quick. He won't have the same kind of outrageous cutting ability, and the speed won't be at the level it's at. But he'll be very elusive still in the pocket, and he'll still be a guy who can extend a play. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger can extend a play. You can do it with physicality, or you can do it with some speed. And he should still be able to make plays from the pocket. And the thing I really love this year is how successful Jackson has maintained his ability to throw under pressure. We saw that mostly in Week 1 against the Browns. Very few extensive pockets, but he had a 152 quarterback rating in that game, 152 and change, I think, and he was just under a lot of pressure. And I don't know how PFF had it scored for that week, but I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, I can't remember the specifics, but I think it is something that... So this is very anecdotal, and it's not something I've got anything that can in any way back it up. But anecdotally, when quarterbacks extend the play, sometimes it's being done under duress, and they're scrambling away. Lamar, at times when I watch him, extends plays, and it's very much on his terms.
Yeah.
So he's extending the play not because he's being chased, but because he's decided, I'm going to buy myself some more time and space here. And I think that's an underrated thing for a quarterback.
Yeah, the 4th and 5 play is 100% that. That was an extended roll right, and he had all the time in the world. In fact, he manipulated those two defenders, Vernon and Mitchell, I guess it was, to come towards him on the play, and then he just made an easy pitch and catch toss. We've seen others this year, but there have also been duress ones, and a lot of the duress comes when he rolls left, because no right-handed quarterback likes to roll left. It's a horrible thing, horrible place to be. And he had the touchdown pass to Andrews when he rolled left on just an unbelievable throw. He's had a number of throws, particularly thinking back to that Cleveland game, where he made a great throw that way. But there's others. I agree with you on the 4th and 5 play is probably the best example, but he's had 2 touchdown passes where he basically baited defenders on a roll right to come up and allow a tight end to be released for a touchdown. And I love that kind of thing where he's manipulating the defenders on the edge.
I had a really good discussion with a guy called John Costco, who is one of our analysts. Don't want to give him his wrong job. I think he's like our one of our lead quarterback graders. And I was talking with him about Jackson. And one of the things he said to me in a positive way was that if you have edge defenders who are even a little bit undisciplined in their lane discipline as pass rushers, Lamar Jackson can just kill you. And I think you saw that in the second Cleveland game this year. You know, Myles Garrett, I think, has probably dropped off a little bit. And I think from what he said himself, I think there's some lingering COVID issues there for him that are potentially impacting his stamina. But being able to take advantage of really good pass rushers being a little bit undisciplined is something that Jackson can do, and when he does, can be really devastating for opposing defenses.
Yeah, he had some runs left in that game, didn't he? Escaped the pocket in that direction. Vernon, I thought, did a reasonably good job on him until the big play, until the 4th and 5. But yeah, I think you're right about that. Anyway, great stuff about Jackson. He still seems to have some trust issues with some receivers. And I looked at the throw he made to Andrews. Between the numbers and the left hash, put up among about 4 defenders. Andrews high-pointed the ball. There's no way he has the trust to throw that to Miles Boykin. No. There's no way. Same receivers or same route opportunity, he'd have never thrown it.
It's a little bit like when Joe Flacco was the quarterback and he had Dennis Pitt and he had Anquan Bolden. And there's throws that Lamar makes to Mark Andrews that were the same throws that Flacco would make to those guys, which was, I'm going to put this in a general spot and I'm going to trust that you're going to go up and win it. He doesn't have the same trust with Miles Boykin. Marquise Brown has other issues, obviously size-wise. It's incredibly difficult for him to be in that kind of spot there. But I've said this to a couple of people recently. I think an Anquan Bolden type receiver, and maybe it's something that Miles Boykin develops into, is probably what Jackson really needs at the wide receiver position. And I think it's unfortunate because I think Hollywood Brown has a load of pros to his game. Catching obviously this season has been a little bit inconsistent for him, to be kind. But if you look back on that draft, there's some receivers that I think probably would have fit with Jackson's style a little bit better. But I understand what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to build an offense where speed's going to really hurt you and speed can kill. So it made sense.
Right. I'm in agreement with that. I do want to see Jackson do one thing better in terms of throwing to Brown. And I come back to the large receiver thing in a moment, is that I want to see him out-throw the defender in a way that is clear rather than worrying about where Brown will be, because Brown can get to almost anything. But if you out-throw the defender by the proper amount, Brown can get there and make a play after the catch. Yep. And I don't think he's done enough of that. The ball's either coming out late, and I think if he was more focused on how to beat the defender, that it would result in better things.
I think as well, you can see the examples when he has just dropped back, hit the top of his drop and ripped it to Marquise Brown downfield. There was the play this week down the left sideline, and then probably his 2 best throws last year, I thought, were down the right sideline to Brown. One was against the Cardinals, and the other was in the 2-minute drill against the Titans. Just a ridiculous throw. So he has it in him, and maybe Lamar's just maybe it's an inconsistency thing, but when he hits those plays, it's incredible. It's just the timing just looks absolutely perfect on them.
Yeah, those were certainly both great throws, and the throws he made against Miami. The first one was one of the rare RPOs of the year where he actually went into the mesh point, pulled it out, and then made the throw, which was just, you wonder, why did they ever go away from that? There has to be a reason, but why? And the other one was a bomb where he out-threw the defender, and it's one of the few times where he's really in his whole career that he's caught Hollywood Brown in stride and gave him a chance to make a big play after the catch. So, I wish that he would do more of that. I'm sorry about that. Okay, and it happens from time to time. I forget to put the phone in the other room. Anyway, accurate for the most part in this game. Bad decision on the early interception. Fortunately, Judon bailed him out with the safety right away. But I don't think we'd be upset at all if Lamar played like this every week.
No, and I think for our grade on him, I think over the course of the game, I think it was like high 60s or low 70s. But
for the game?
For the game, but I think the the sample size for in the game, it was again one of those 3-quarter games that he played, and he had the interception, which was a poor decision or a late decision, and he had the poor pocket presence that led to the fumble. So he had those 2 plays, which they hamper the grade, a little bit, and especially when you have a situation whereby it's 20 to 24 snaps, those things are something that they have a bigger impact on the grade. I actually had a similar conversation with someone about Patrick Queen, because everyone looks at Patrick Queen's PFF grade and it's 29 or something like that. It's terrible.
Right.
And it's just a case of the grade on the sample size is going to weight those bigger plays, the bigger negatives, and the games where he's had significant number of negatives. So in a similar sense, Lamar having a game where he only played about 3/4 of the snaps based on the way the game flow went, and they didn't have to pass much, and on 2 of those passing plays had very negative plays. It's almost something whereby he doesn't get the opportunity to improve his grade further up because of those things.
Okay, so let's talk about that methodology for a second, because I know that really interests Baltimore fans. I get a lot of questions about it, and I understand the splash plays versus the good plays. But let's talk Lamar Jackson's game first of all. So if he has, where is the balance point for the grade? Is it 60 or 65? Where if he is above that, he is contributing to an aggregation of positives on the play?
Yeah, so 60 is generally considered replacement level. Now, it's a little bit difficult because positions aren't created equally, and with the best will in the world, even with a grading system like this, you're never going to get it quite exact. But generally, anything above 60 is you're at the point where you're contributing. It might not be, something at 65, it can be that. But there's a load of different ways to get to 65 to 68, 69. Whereas when you're looking at a grade which is 80 plus, you're probably looking at a game where a couple of things happened. Either you really didn't make any mistakes and had a couple of nice plays, or you had a load of really big plays that game defining plays almost, for that you as a player were contributing to, with maybe 1 or 2 of those smaller things, and it's something whereby a bigger sample size has kind of contributed to that.
Okay, so I can understand that as a mathematician. The problem is that with Queen, I'm having trouble understanding which of his games are contributing to him being below the replacement level by so much, because he clearly has had some terrible games, but he also hasn't had any zeros or any 10s or anything like. You sometimes see a 0 from an offensive lineman on PFF. Yeah.
So one of the things with that's, and this is the way, I was actually trying to explain this to someone last night, and they actually explained it probably better than I did. But if you have a guy who grades at 70 all year, for example, his season grade will be above
85.
70. Yeah. With Queen, he's had 4 games. So the Houston game was a low-graded game. The New England game was, I can't remember. I think Tennessee was another one, and then there was a 4th one. I can't remember off the top of my head. Now the Houston
Kansas
game,
City, he was terrible, but
yeah, the Houston game, there was I think it was the Houston game. There was what really could have quite easily been like a 70-yard pass to the running back on a coverage he missed. I can't remember the specific play. And 70 might be being egregious, but I think there was a big play there. And another play in coverage that he could have given up a touchdown that he didn't. But it's also one of those things that on a season-long grading thing, it's generally not good if you have a linebacker who has 4 games that are really poor. And it's kind of difficult for him to bring that grade back up without having some games that were incredible on the other side. And I think as well, again, he's been asked to play a role that it's tough for rookie linebackers in the NFL. And especially guys coming out of LSU, I think this is something that we've seen more than a few times. Devin White being a recent example as well.
Sure.
Guys who, they react very quickly in college. And I want to say his name is Spencer Schultz, maybe? He tweeted out something today, and he said that he's like a coiled cobra, in that he gets ready and he hesitates sometimes before he jumps. And I think that has an impact.
Right. So, the upgrade in the level of play is good, and it's in a little way it's a microcosm of what happened last year at LSU, because he didn't really start the season well, and you can probably do some Power 5 grading too, and definitely had a significant upward trajectory as the year went on in terms of his own quality of play. It'd be great to see this again at the pro level. He's certainly an athlete that gives you a lot of, what's really nice about him fitting into the Ravens offense is I think he gives you tremendous cleanup skills in your defense. I mean, cleanup sacks, he's already had a couple, one on Burrow, one this week, that were really great. He has definitely some great cleanup pursuit skills that get you out of trouble. What's just the problem is he did not seem to, until recent weeks, get his zone coverage responsibilities down. So week after week, they're just getting botched.
There was points that I would go back and watch the film on. I mean, you'd be watching plays and you're just like, I don't know where you've gone. I don't know. It's just like a little bit of hesitation, and all of a sudden, a huge hole was in behind him, or he just didn't quite get to where he had to get to.
So you do some of the grading for the Ravens specifically, right?
So I actually don't anymore. So
Okay.
we're now branching into soccer, and that's my full-time role. But I do still,
good for you.
I do still, because I enjoy American football so much, and because I'm a Ravens fan, I do spend a lot of time. Like, I watch every game live and go back and watch the coach's film when it comes out as well.
You don't want to feel like you're biased or whatever, or have anyone insinuate that anyway. But that's great to hear. You've got that as a new opportunity, and good to know. I had a question I was going to ask you. Oh, I know what it was. So, thinking back to the early days of PFF, and I knew Neil way back then. We were in talks way back then, but the +2 to -2 grading system by halves still underlies the PFF system that is then converted to these 0 to 100 scales.
Yeah.
So the question I would have is this: I think it would be a lot more explainable on the aggregate +2 to -2 score level to see why Queen is still -14 or whatever he is for the year. At the way the grade levels were done, but you kind of lost that with the desire to put that behind the Oz's curtain, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely, there's loads of things that I preferred about the old system, and I think that's one of the things that I think was really good, is you were able to, it was kind of easily explainable. You could look at a player and you could say, look, this game was a -10, so the next game being a +6. There is a bit of balance there, but that's why he's still -4. And it's a little bit hard with this. And to be honest, another one of the things is that I didn't really initially realize how the weighting worked with it, and how, kind of built things up and stuff like that. And it's something that people smarter than me, math-wise, have put in place. And I think at times, if I look at it in a way that I struggle, then I can understand why other people would look at that and be like, oh, I don't, this doesn't make sense, because it looks like a system that should average out. So I think that's a fair criticism.
Yeah, I think, by the way, I think the actual bonus grading that occurs when you're over average for a period of time, that makes perfect sense to me. But
Yeah.
What would make even more sense is just knowing what the underlying numbers were, so it would be graded back to the thing. Anyway, I wonder what the theory was behind that when they changed systems. I understand you want to keep some of that behind the curtain, and you're probably selling some of it to the teams. But would at the elite package level, say, wouldn't it be okay to give out that actual grading again and show it? Or maybe if it's out there at the elite level, then everybody knows it anyway because people blab. I just don't know what it might have.
It was an interesting thing whereby effectively we were trying to brand, when we're trying to put things out on social media. And there was a point whereby because we'd kept the old system up at first and we had the new system, and there was a point whereby people in the media still had access to the old system, so we'd be tweeting out, a guy graded at 74.3, and then people in the media would be talking about a guy being a +16 and stuff like that. So it became like a huge confusion, in that there was almost like two sets of grading being talked about, and it seemed to cause quite a bit of confusion. So I think we just kind of forged ahead with one at that point.
Okay, so it wasn't a marketing or dollars concern to keep that grading level secret or something else. It was just a inconsistency of grades between two systems.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, the initial reason to bring out the 0 to 100, or it's rarely 0 to 100, but is that a general criticism that I think we'd had at first from a kind of bigger percentage of people was just a 0 to 100 system is easier for a lot of people to kind of get an idea on how good a player is. It's why I think I really enjoyed the old system as well, because obviously spending a lot of time with it, there was loads of things I understood about it. But yeah, I think that was the...
All right, look, it's just cool to kind of get a look behind the curtain. I appreciate you explaining some of this to us. Any other skill position players you'd like to talk about? We've talked about a few of them in this game, but let's alternate here. And who would you like to talk about that we haven't so far?
I like the fact, as much as I ragged on the fact that height-wise and he's not the most physical receiver in the world, I think Hollywood Brown's had, the best stretch of his season, and, he's looked a lot more... Maybe not in the Cleveland game. I'm probably giving him a bit too much credit for the explosive play that won the game. But he certainly looked a lot more explosive in the last couple of weeks than he did at the start of the season, when there was a lot of inconsistency, a lot more drops. The Cleveland game obviously had some drops, but he bounced back. Thought that this was a game... The interesting thing about going into this game is that Jacksonville, I think, had allowed a 100-yard receiver in every single game.
Yes.
Coming in, or in almost every single game coming into that. And I want to say he fell, 2 yards short? I think he was at 98 or something by the end of it. So that was a little bit annoying, because it would have been nice to have kept that streak going. But I think the play down the left sideline shows that when him and Lamar can get their timing right, they can cause defenses some pretty significant problems. And the one thing coming into this year, that if Brown had taken a nice big step forward, or the two of them together had taken a nice step forward, I think that just poses another huge problem to opposing defenses.
Right. They did have there was a long pass interference play on Andrews, but I can't remember if that would have taken them off over 100 yards. Yeah, it was 36 yards on Wingard, so that would have taken Andrews to 102 had that been a complete. Oh, actually, but probably more than that. I did get a tweet here from a friend of mine, says they used the pony backfield 3 times in the game in this. Interesting. So it's something we've seen a little bit of from the Ravens last year. They didn't actually run a single snap of pony during last year's regular season, but it's a maybe another concession to what's going on with Lamar, and also maybe another concession to the fact they no longer have 3 tight ends they can put on the field. So they have to find some additional ways to scheme up different ways to attack the defense.
Yeah, I think I've liked the fact that they've been a little bit more creative with certain things. There was a load of criticism about them, their success or lack thereof out of empty sets. And you've seen them now, the 2-point play against Cleveland, and then it was a touchdown this past week, I think, where they motion Dobbins out of empty and hand the ball to him. And I think doing stuff like that you give defenses something extra to think about. And I always think that the biggest thing in the NFL these days is try and put linebackers in a bind. And I think the last couple of weeks, the Ravens offense has kind of got back to doing that a little bit more.
Yeah, we certainly saw it in that Cowboys game, and these 3 games. I mean, they've scored 121 points. That will do it. That's really it. The defense can play pretty much at any level if the offense is scoring like that. The defense can play with the lead, and a lot of the things you talked about earlier. It just becomes a lot easier to play football with the lead. Yeah,
I also think if the goal is to go and win a Super Bowl, which it always is, people have spent a load of time talking about how the best way that you can play against Patrick Mahomes, the best way to play against Patrick Mahomes is score 40 points and gives you a chance. If you're trying to win a game 25-20 against Patrick Mahomes, it's probably not a winning strategy. So if this Ravens offense can get to the playoffs, can get a game against the Chiefs, and if they can score 30 to 40 points in that game, they have a reasonable chance. I think that's a really important point. I think when people talk about the way that you want to play against Mahomes, it's so much more about what you do on offense than it is on defense, I think.
Right. I agree. And one of the things we've seen from a lot of the great teams from recent years, be that Denver when Manning was there, Indianapolis with Manning, New England with Brady, Mahomes certainly now is the case. They're all absolutely marvelous at bridging the first and second half to try and get back-to-back 2 turns in a row, so to speak, where they would get a couple of drives. He's mastered the 2-minute drill. And, part of that is just he seems to be better when he's under a little bit of duress or is made to not think about what's going on in a different way. And then the third quarter, the Ravens often have come out strong as well. that back-to-back kind of strategy, I think, is one of the things we've seen from a lot of the great teams in recent years. And if Lamar can continue to build on what he's done successfully there, it'd be great.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, because let's say you can score a touchdown either side of the half, 2-minute touchdown and then score on the opening possession. If you're looking at realistically in the playoffs wanting to get yourself to 30 points, those 2 drives gets you halfway there. And it's just, it's a huge bonus that it's also time that you can score quickly like that. It's tougher for your opponent. Yeah,
it certainly changes what they thought they were going to have to do going into halftime. So you may get even an adjustment value out of it that's positive. You probably did make adjustments yourself to figure out how to re-script at the beginning of the half. I've often been I don't know if the word is quite critical, because Duvernay is now MIA from the offense in these last few weeks, and I really would have liked to seen him continue to be included if they can make it work. But they were getting him a lot of scripted throws. They got Boykin some scripted throws as well. Now it seems like the scripting that they do is not as much about that, but it's more about scoring a lot of points and winning the game, as opposed to trying to figure out how to get the other team worried about multiple weapons.
Yeah, and I think people this year have spoken about the fact that it felt at times like the Ravens and Lamar kind of wanting to prove people wrong on a bunch of things that has been said about the offense and about Jackson as a quarterback. And I think it now very much feels like you said, like they've reached that point in the season that they just don't really care about anything else. They don't care what you want to say about them. They're just going to go and try and win games. And it's good, because I think that's when they're at their best, when they're just playing kind of with no concerns about anything. Just go and just run the offense the way you run it.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, last year in terms of football, it's an overstatement, but it's not too far off that. I mean, they're a historic offense. They're like the Harlem Globetrotters. Just go out there and play the way you want to play. Don't worry about the way they say you ought to play, and you'll be good. But anyway, positive. I am a little sad about Duvernay not being part of the offense. I'm probably even more sad that Des Bryant is part of the offense, because I don't really think he's providing the Ravens with anything they couldn't get from other receivers. I was happy to see him make a couple good run blocks in this last game, because other than that, he really has not provided much as a receiver, certainly since he came here.
Yeah, there's only one play that I think his touchdown was something that there was a little bit of veteran savvy and ability to come back to the ball that I'm not sure other wide receivers in the Ravens roster would have made that play. But certainly earlier in the season, when he first made it onto the active roster, and they were forcing the ball to him on wide receiver screens that were picking up 3-4 yards, that again felt like you're kind of trying to force something here that is a player who hasn't been on the field in 2 years. I'm not sure if it's necessarily the best course of action, but if you can get some plays like you saw in the touchdown, that little bit of veteran savvy might give them something they don't have at wide receiver. It was a unusual play, because Lamar is very good at making a throwing lane with his feet inside the red zone. It's the central reason for his enormous success is that he doesn't have any fade routes, basically. I think they threw one to Hollywood Brown this year, and I was like, it's the first one they've run in 2 years here. But with Dez, he's being a size receiver isn't the thing that's going to make him valuable in the end zone. It would be being a wily receiver, and I do think players like Duvernay, players like all the tight ends that the Ravens have had also brought that. Like Boyle, he had a touchdown earlier this year. He had the touchdown last year against Buffalo that was on that kind of a shot put throw. You know what I'm talking about? That he bobbled it a couple times going down. They don't need to create fade opportunities for receivers. They don't even really use zipper throws very much, but when they do, it's Andrews. It's all about Lamar basically maneuvering until, oh, wait, there's a straight line between me and this guy. I'll throw the ball. Anyway, let me ask you one more thing. Chris Moore or Des Bryant, who should be active this next week, assuming that's a choice they have to make? If Moore is healthy, I think I probably would have him. Again, some of the little things I think you probably want to... Don't even know how much you're going to use him on offense, but you're going to be able to use him on special teams. It's difficult. Like I said, I think that was a nice play by Bryant, and if you can get that on offense, you might have a couple of plays where you need something like that. but I think Chris Moore probably contributes more overall.
Okay. Des Bryant now 3.9 yards per target for this year. He's got a 50% catch rate, which exactly matches his last 3 seasons at Dallas. So that's probably over expectation. I'm having trouble finding a reason to keep this guy around. I know they say he's been good and being, teaching other receivers and whatnot. That's one thing. 35, 32 snaps per game, whatever they've been giving him, for a couple of his big weeks, just seems like really overdoing it.
Yeah, and also I don't want to see them force the ball to him. It's an offense that passes are going to always be a little bit limited compared with some other offenses, and I like seeing Willie Snead get 4 or 5 targets a game because I think he's really solid receiver, can do some solid work over the middle. I would not want to see it continue whereby Dez eats into 2 or 3 of those targets for Willie Snead.
Yeah, or even into the snaps. I mean, Snead provides a lot as the motion player and what he can contribute to a level 2 or 3 block on a run play. And I know Dez has done a little bit, but there's so much more that a player like Snead can give you than a player like Bryant in terms of snap count. And, whoever you think deserves more snaps on the Ravens right now at receiver, they're probably giving up some to Dez Bryant.
Yeah, between Duvernay, especially Duvernay and Snead
And Boykin.
Yep.
Yeah, those 3. Yep, they're losing ground. All right. Well, Gordon, we appreciate having you on. So I'm going to have to set the mailbag aside since we've gone over by a fair amount, but we really appreciate you taking the extra time. Always such a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Glad to hear about your new opportunity at PFF. Tell us about folks where they can find you on Twitter and where else people can contact you.
Yeah, so on Twitter you're going to get me on @PFF_Gordon. Right now with this new role for me just now, there's not a lot of, in fact, there's no writing going on. You'll still catch me tweeting about American football. You'll still catch me tweeting about the Ravens. But yeah, Twitter is definitely the best place to get hold of me. Okay,
very cool. Any other features or articles you have coming up? Are you doing any more football work at all?
I'm really not. I'm fully now. I've got a fairly senior role on this side of the company, so it's good. It was a difficult decision for me. I ran our social media last year. It was the second time I'd done that, and it's a difficult decision for me because I love both sports. A lot of people have like a favourite sport. Grew up in Scotland, so I've always liked the soccer version of football. But since a teenager, I've been in love with the American version of football as well. So, one of those things whereby it was an opportunity that came up, and thankfully I still get to be involved with PFF, so I can still I can still see a bunch of the grades and a bunch of things like that, and I still get plenty of time to watch football, which is really a good thing. Very cool. Okay, so I know it's after 10 o'clock over there in Scotland, right? Yep. And are you in the Edinburgh area or are you somewhere else? I'm in Glasgow, so it's like maybe about an hour outside of Edinburgh. Okay. All right, very good. My ancestral home going way back, not that matters, but generations ago. I'll tell you a little bit more about what's going on at Film Study Baltimore this week. We've got the offensive line article that will be out on probably Thursday this week. Know Your Foe is the next recording we'll be doing. We have a good guest from the Giants for that. Obviously, a challenge of a game. What do you think about that one, by the way, Gordon? It was the one I highlighted and circled a couple of weeks ago as the one that worries me a little bit. I think the Giants are a little bit better than people think they are in terms of they can cause you some problems on defense. They gave the Seahawks some big problems, though I think the Seahawks have dropped off quite a bit. And I also think Daniel Jones, if he plays, can offer a bit in the running game as a quarterback, which always just, as I say, puts the bind on opposing linebackers. And he's not Lamar Jackson, but he can still cause you some problems there. So it's one that I still think they'll win. It just worries me just a little bit. Let me give you one more what if. I mean, this seems to be a good week. If you really don't trust Patrick Queen in terms of zone responsibilities, do you trust him as a spy? Yeah. I mean, I think that would be an interesting way to do that, have him spy Daniel Jones. And I think, as you said earlier, a lot of the cleanup stuff he's done, I think when he has something that he can focus on and react to, I think that's when he's at his best. So yeah, that might be a way that allows him to have a really impressive game. All right. Well, thanks again. All the methodology stuff, very cool.
We appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.
Thanks for having me on.